Welcome to episode 10 of the Ask the Law Firm Seller Show. My name is Jeremy Poock, and I lead Senior Attorney Match. In today's episode, we'll have two sections. First section will be a Q&A section, and we'll discuss three questions today. And the second section will be Poock's Post. This is a preview for Poock's Post. We're going to be analogizing how today in the early part of the mid-2020s, how that is eerily similar to the early part of the 2010s when we compare to Uber and how Uber disrupted the taxi cab medallion industry. So let's jump right into it with Q&A. So our first question today is, what if I decide to become a referring attorney? So just as a genesis to that question, I meet with attorneys who meet with law firms, and a statement by a very successful personal injury law attorney really just made me think, like, that's an interesting question, an interesting point that he brought up, which was if he could do it all over again, he said he would come back and just be a referring attorney. So, in the context of senior attorneys considering to sell their law firms, we explain to our clients that senior attorney-led firms have five components of value to their law practices. And those five components of value, the five components of value to a senior attorney-led firm, they consist of the client list and the referral source list taken together. That's the book of business. The third component to to valuing a law firm is the goodwill that a senior attorney and the law firm that senior attorneys have developed over the course of their careers. Similarly, subject matter knowledge, and then finally, the digital value that law firms continue to develop in this post-2020 environment that we are all in. When senior attorneys are thinking about selling their law practice, they typically have certain thoughts on their minds. And those typical thoughts that we hear very often from our clients is, when can I finally slow down? When can I finally take a 2-week plus vacation? Why aren't my would-be internal successors, that is my junior partners, my senior associates, why aren't they coming down the hall and inquiring about purchasing the practice? And then also, just to turn to those would-be internal successors, the frustration that senior attorneys feel because they really don't want to typically purchase your law practice, and they can't afford to either. And so when we explain to our clients that an alternative to an internal sale is to join a growing law firm, they're typically saying to us that as our clients are raising three fears with us, right? That is, if we're saying that, okay, our preferred recommendation to you when it comes to selling your law firm is consider joining a firm. What we're often hearing are three what we call fears, concerns that senior attorneys express to us. First concern is, I don't want to have a boss at this point in my career, because even though I may be joining a firm, selling my practice to them, by the way, when our clients are joining growing law firms, they're typically practicing for a couple of years, transitioning their books of business over to those firms, and then during their retirement years, they're being paid an earnout based upon the revenues that are derived from that book of business that they've transitioned over to their practice. But nonetheless, that first fear is, I'm afraid that I'm going to have a boss and be told what to do at this point in my life, which is typically when lawyers are in their late 50s, 60s, or even into their 70s. The second fear is a fear of a loss of control, right? When you own your own practice, run your own small business, you can come early in the morning, leave late at night, or just the opposite. You could come midday. You can take time off when you want, come in on a Saturday, come in on a Sunday. And there's a concern that you could actually lose control. And then the third fear and concern is a loss of identity, right? Like the ownership of the law firm, it's yours. You developed it. It's your baby. It's your child. Okay. And so that by joining a growing law firm, we're often hearing from our clients, that these are our concerns: having a boss, loss of control, and loss of identity. Nonetheless, right, we're presenting typically three options to our clients about what it is that you can consider when you're thinking about selling your law firm. And that preferred option is join a growing law firm. The potential option is structure an internal succession plan to internal lawyers at your firm, but those lawyers often they don't want to purchase your practice and they can't afford to either. And then the risky option is just to maintain your status quo. And the reason why we call this risky is because, yeah, even though today is like yesterday, we don't know necessarily that tomorrow is going to be like today and yesterday anymore, because we are now in what we call the 3.0 digital era for the legal industry, which means that clients today are searching for their lawyers online primarily. And by maintaining the status quo and by senior attorneys not adopting digital marketing to attract new clients to their firms, we're finding that their revenues are going down. We're also finding that their would-be internal successors will only wait so long before they leave your firm and look for another job. Hence, that status quo is risky. So, what is an alternative option for senior attorneys to consider? So, going back to this question that we've raised, that's raised in this question, which is, could I become a referring attorney? And that is absolutely another option for senior attorneys to consider. Every state has a version in the rules of professional conduct of Rule 1.5. Most lawyers know of Rule 1.5 in the context of personal injury law. Make a referral to a personal injury law attorney, and often that personal injury law firm will fee share somewhere in the neighborhood of 1/3. Well, Rule 1.5 applies to typically any type of referral. Each jurisdiction, that is, each state has different forms of Rule 1.5. Some states require more involvement, some form, let's say, of a joint representation when a lawyer is making a referral to another law firm. Some states don't include those retirements. But when it comes to an alternative to selling your law firm, and if you don't want to sell to a growing law firm and join a growing law firm, your internal successor doesn't want to take it over, and the risk of the status quo could result in your firm not generating as much revenues. Referring matters to lawyers whom you know, like, and trust. And the trust part is huge, okay? Because when lawyers are referring their clients to other lawyers whom they trust, they're able to take advantage of what we call in our model, in terms of the sales of law firms, we call the flux capacitor of that model is trust transfer. That is, your clients trust you. That's why they come to you. It's why they rely on you. Well, when you transfer that trust to another law firm, and it could be several law firms under this referring attorney model, well, those same clients that trust you, they are going to trust the lawyers who you are referring business to. Now, in yesteryear, so often lawyers just figured, you know what? If I scratch his or her back today, they're going to scratch my back tomorrow. But if you're a senior attorney and you're contemplating how can you sell your practice, certainly this option of referring your clients to one or more firms in consideration for referral fees per Rule 1.5 is absolutely an option to consider, because when we go back to the 5 components of value that senior attorneys have developed over the course of their careers, and the 2 primary components of that value is your client list and referral source list. If you start referring business as part of your succession plan to lawyers at third-party law firms in consideration for fee sharing, that is absolutely another avenue for you to realize and be paid upon the value of that book of business, that client list and referral source list that you've developed over the course of your careers. And I'll just say one other thing, because we hear this from our clients. Some of our senior attorney clients, they're actually turning away business because they recognize that that business could involve multiple years. And if they don't want to be practicing for multiple years, they'll say to their client, you know what, we can't represent you. I'm sorry, not going to take on this business. Well, why not refer it under Rule 1.5 to a firm that you know, like, and trust? The client will be in good hands, and you can be paid consideration for making that referral. Okay, so for our second question today, our second question is, what issues should I consider in advance of selling my law practice? So we hear this question a lot, right? I mean, lawyers, we've been trained to spot issues. Okay, so surely when lawyers are thinking about selling their law practices, they're going to be thinking about, okay, what are the issues? What should I be thinking of? So here we're showing a checklist of items that we recommend that lawyers and law firms should be considering in advance of selling their law firms. So first and foremost is your client list and referral source list. Okay, is how can you update that list? Super important because that is the major value of today's senior attorney led firms. Because we're still in what we call law firm sales 1.0. And in law firm sales 1.0, the consideration that's paid for a law firm is based upon a percentage of revenues derived from the defined clients of a senior attorney or the senior attorney led firm's book of business over a negotiated number of years. So in terms of what are the issues to be considering in advance of selling your law firm is please update the client list, update your referral source list, addresses, email addresses, cell phone numbers, connecting with these people on LinkedIn as well. Updating your website, right? That's always the tomorrow to do item, right? I mean, no lawyer, I don't think, well, there are lawyers that really enjoy marketing, but few of us really enjoy marketing and look at the website as, all right, that's tomorrow's project. Well, if you're considering selling your law firm, it is the first place where any potential buyer is going to look. They're going to look at your website. They're going to look at your picture. If that picture was taken 15 or 20 years ago, I'm sure you're still handsome or beautiful at this point in your life. And it's important to update the picture of the lawyers, even of the para staff, include the bios, add new content, remove stale content. That article that you wrote in 2002, okay, it was great for a couple of years, but we're now in the mid 2020s. So important to update that website. Your LinkedIn profile, also something that not many attorneys spend enough time on, but absolutely. First, clients look at your LinkedIn profiles today. They do. Okay. And would be buyers are going to be looking at your LinkedIn profiles as well. So it's important not only update that profile, but also connect with additional professionals. We're recommending try to get as many as 500 plus connections on LinkedIn. It's doable, takes a couple of weeks literally, and we certainly recommend that. Um, Looking at your malpractice insurance policy. What are the premium? What's the premium? What's the coverage? Important to look in the back of the policy. There is a provision in the back of the policy. It's the extended reporting period, aka the tail. Okay, it's not cheap, so it's important to know. And when I say it's not cheap, it's typically somewhere in the neighborhood of a 2.25 to a 3x of your current year's policy premium. So when you're thinking of selling your law firm, any buying firm typically requires you to purchase a tail. So it's important to just get a sense for how much that would cost. And then we've listed a number of items relating to contracts that you have that have terms of 30 days or more, just so there's no surprises, right? The biggest one is your office lease. Now, please, we're always recommending to people, please consider your office lease is just a deal term. Okay. Yes, it's an expensive part of the operation of your practice, but just because you've got 2 or 3 years left on the lease does not mean that you should put off succession planning for 2 to 3 years. But in terms of thinking about the issues to be considering in advance of your law firm sale, obviously we should be looking at the commercial lease. Your legal research; those contracts are often for multiple years. Even things like your copy machine, lawyers still use Pitney Bowes machines. Your telephone contract, your website contract, anything that you have for more than 30 days, just so that you're not caught by surprise. And just to look at this in a different way, as in a synopsis type way, we're recommending three particular important updates to make before selling your law firm. One is to really know your top revenues by your practice areas, right? Like where's the money coming in to your firm? Okay, what are the top revenue practice areas? And interestingly, sometimes that's not even your most volume areas. You can have a high volume in a certain segment of your practice, but be more profitable or have higher revenues in other parts of the practice. And we recommend looking at 3 to 4 of your top practice areas and go back at least 3 to 4 years to really know where does the money come from into your firm. The second important update is that client list, right? It's updating the addresses, the emails, the cell phone numbers as well, and try to connect with your clients and other professionals on LinkedIn. And then that third update is to update your website, remove the stale content, add new pictures, and also join LinkedIn, or at least refresh whatever you have on LinkedIn, particularly your photo and your bio, and connect with as many people as possible. And please try to get up to 500 connections at least on LinkedIn. Your clients and would-be purchasers look at your LinkedIn profile. Okay, so for our third question today, our third question is, what typical issues arise after selling a law firm by joining a growing law firm? So let's look first at the three options that senior attorneys have when they're considering selling a law firm. Those three options are: join a growing law firm, which we recommend as our preferred option because growing law firms, they really want and need what you have. The potential option is structure an internal succession plan with an internal buyer. We call that potential because we just find in the marketplace that few and far between are the internal successors that really want to purchase a law firm, because typically they really can't afford to, and they went to law school and not business school. And the third option is just maintain your status quo. Okay, just don't do anything, but it's an option because things change. A random Tuesday we bring up sometimes could happen, which could cause your law firm to lose significant value. If, let's say, the senior attorney can no longer practice because of a random Tuesday type event, or a key employee, including a key lawyer staff member, leaves the firm. In terms of that focus on selling to a growing law firm, our preferred option, let's look at just how long it typically takes to sell a law practice. And what we find is that it takes 6 meetings to sell a law firm, from the beginning of a meet and greet, to go through due diligence, negotiate typically a letter of intent, sign that letter of intent, negotiate the agreement, and then sign the agreement. So great, you've gotten to know the people that you're going to join, but then what happens next? Okay, and we're showing here that there's typically 4 steps needed to achieve success after senior attorneys have joined growing law firms as their pathway to sell the firm. Because you've run your office for so many years, growing firm has run its office for many, many years, and we find the 4 steps needed to achieve success are a listening tour at the outset, a need for both sides to adapt, and then to adopt, and then they get to grow together. And now let's look at the issues. Okay, that is, when senior attorneys and their staff join growing law firms, there are issues that come up. And what we're showing here is really 4 stages of issues to address and to be cognizant of. The first is pre-sale. Okay, what are items to address? And the first 30 in the call it the pre-30. Okay, we've signed that agreement. The agreement will state that there is a commencement date for when the lawyers of a senior attorney-led firm are going to join the growing law firm. Well, what are the items? What are the issues to address? So some of those items and issues to address, first and foremost, of course, is how are we going to notify the clients? What are we going to do about the files? What are we going to do with the phone number, the website, the escrow account? Okay, so identifying all of these different items and issues at least 30 days before joining the growing firm. The next is the first 30 days after that commencement date. And here's what we call that listening tour. Okay, that is that during the listening tour, it's so important for both sides to just listen to each other, because what we find in the first 30 days, and it's just bound to happen, is a couple of things. One is hey, this is the way we've always done it, versus, hey, this is the way that we do it here. And at some point we find, unfortunately, the growing law firm, someone there takes out this proverbial sort of sheriff's badge and says, you know what, this is the way we do it here. And it's just very important for both sides to just listen to each other and start learning from each other. And frankly, we make a comparison to like a bumpy plane ride. When the plane is accelerating to get to cruising altitude, there's absolute bumps on the way, but that listening tour in the first 30 days is absolutely huge. Second, 60 days, which is from 30 days to 90. What are some of the issues and what are some of the items to be addressing then? That is what we call adapt and adopt. Both sides are going to need to adapt to each other and also adopt new ways of doing things, because a sale of a law firm is absolutely not at this point a turnkey operation. We're not selling a franchise where there's the franchise guidebook to how this is done. Often these are two separate businesses. They came together because they have synergistic values. And just an example from one of our clients was that one of our clients utilized Outlook for their calendar system, and they calendared multiple items for multiple states because they needed to file certain documents in those states multiple times per year. It's a lot of multiples there, but they really relied on their Outlook calendar system. Well, guess what? The buying firm, the growing firm, used Google Calendar. And at first, that buying firm said, you know what? We use Google. We're the new sheriffs in town. You've got to adopt Google Calendar. And, it started World War 56 probably, because there was World War 3 to 55, that led up to finally we brought in maybe it wasn't that bad, but, we brought in an IT person and we figured out, you know what? Google and Outlook can talk to each other, and we resolved it. Okay. But that was adapting and adopting. And after getting through those 30 to 90 days, then there's 90 to 180, which we call growing together. And what are the issues and items there in 90 to 180? That is, you're at cruising altitude at that point. And what's super important at that point is for both sides to recognize and remember they came together because the senior attorney really wants to transition his or her clients and referral sources to lawyers at the growing firm. And it's so important to grow together and not have silos. And we really recommend during that 90 to 80 days, like that's when you're working together. That's when you're going to meetings together. You're going on to Zoom meetings together. You are going to court together, building up that trust, because it's that trust, that transfer from the senior attorney to lawyers at the growing law firm that really is what we call that flux capacitor for how our model works, because it's how the clients are going to matriculate over to a growing law firm. And really, it's how a senior attorney winds up getting paid over the negotiated period of time that the senior attorney negotiated in that contract that was then in what we're talking about 180 days ago. But they've got to learn and be able to grow together for all sides to reap the benefits of transitioning that book of business of the senior attorney over to the growing law firm, and then the senior attorney be paid out that percentage of revenues, all negotiated in the agreement, over the negotiated period of time. Okay, so for our second segment today, for today's Pooks post, today's Pooks post is that the mid 2020s for senior attorneys eerily compares to the mid 2010s for taxi cab medallion owners. So, absolutely, the writing is on the wall in the early part of the mid 2020s that clients today are searching for their lawyers online. Just drop the mic. It's a fact. Okay. We Google for anything and everything outside of searching for lawyers. And beginning in 2020, and certainly it was before 2020 as well, but that all important digital pivot that impacted all of us in 2020, that didn't just creep into the legal industry, it leapt into the legal industry. And so clients today are searching for their lawyers online, as compared to where most senior attorneys built up their books of business in the pre-2020, pre-Google era, when they handed out thousands upon thousands of business cards in what we call the word of mouth era. So how do we get here to where that writing is on the wall? In terms of an ongoing shift of consumer behavior, more new clients are being attracted to finding firms that have adopted multi-channel digital marketing. And if you're not being found, which we're finding a lot among senior attorneys today, if you're not being found when clients are searching for their lawyers online, then what we're finding in terms of that writing is on the wall is that senior attorneys are attracting less new clients. So now let's make this comparison. Okay. We all lived through the disruption in the taxi cab industry that Uber presented. Okay. Seems strange, at least to me, okay, that Uber was only founded in 2009. Okay. What's not strange is that by the mid 2010s, we all started using Uber, and that Uber surpassed the New York taxi cab ridership in 2017. So in terms of the writing is on the wall, absolutely. The taxi cab medallion owners in New York City and throughout the United States and really worldwide, the writing was on the wall by the early to mid part of the 2010s that their medallions were becoming less valuable because of the disruption, the digital disruption that Uber presented. Because even as convenient as we can all remember, for those of us that have been fortunate or maybe unfortunate in terms of hailing a cab in Midtown Manhattan, right? Sticking up an arm, putting out a leg, screaming, "Hey, taxi," right? It's so much more convenient that we can just be in our office, our home, go onto the Uber app, and we know what's the car, what's the license plate, how much it's going to cost, when they're going to get me there. And that disruption caused that writing to be on the wall for taxi cab medallion owners in the early part of the 2010s, that the value of those medallions was absolutely going down. So how do we now compare that to the legal industry, and particularly to senior attorneys and their books of business? Okay, today's senior attorneys, which are lawyers that have practiced for more than 30 years, they built up their books of business, right? Their clients and their referral sources primarily pre-Google in what we call the word of mouth era. And it's that book of business that is the primary value of today's law firms. Because what is it that any buying law firm wants and needs? They want and need your clients and your referral sources, and they're prepared to pay. They're typically paying a percentage of revenues that come in from that book of business. And absolutely, it is the book of business that is the primary value component of most law firms in the early part of the mid 2020s. With the disruption of digital, what we are seeing and what senior attorneys are experiencing is that their books of business are becoming less valuable, because if you are attracting less clients because you're not investing in digital marketing and you're not present for when clients are searching today for their lawyers online, then if you're attracting less clients, and on top of that, as a senior attorney, if your referral sources who are typically comparably aged as you, if your referral sources are starting to retire, then your book of business is just not replenishing as much as it did in yesteryear. So if we look at that from a short-term standpoint as well, okay, what we're seeing is that the revenues of today's senior attorneys, that is for attorneys that are maintaining their status quo, okay, and not investing in multi-channel digital marketing, okay, and maintaining a status quo as they did in the pre-Google word of mouth era, we're finding that their revenues are going down. And also, as a result of the revenues going down from less clients being generated, their practices are becoming less valuable. But here's the but. And here is how we can really compare and contrast what happened to Uber in the early part of the 2010s in terms of Uber disrupting the taxi cab medallion industry, as compared to senior attorneys today in the early part of the mid 2020s. The significant difference in terms of challenging the premise that these are really so similar, okay? The difference is that senior attorneys continue to present synergy value to growing law firms that want and need the four components of that synergy value. Senior attorneys continue to have instant client growth that they could bring to growing firms. They have lawyers and support staff at their firms that growing law firms want and need. More and more, those growing law firms, they need competent, trained, capable lawyers and support staff that many senior attorney-led firms have. Senior attorney-led firms have cumulative experience that they bring to growing law firms. And the fourth component to the synergy value is the treasure trove of marketing value that senior attorneys present to growing law firms. And in terms of looking at that from a business development standpoint, okay, we compare what senior attorneys bring to growing law firms to windmills. Okay, windmills, as we know, they generate energy. Well, what is the energy source for all law firms? Right, all law firms need what? They need new clients. And senior attorneys today, in the early part of the mid 2020s, they present five forms of windmills. Right, the client list is windmill number one. The referral source list, windmill number two. The goodwill that they've developed over the course of their careers, windmill number three. Subject matter knowledge that they've developed over the course of their careers is windmill number four. And the digital value that they have not fully developed yet, but growing law firms want and need to develop and build out that digital value is windmill number five. And that is the significant contrast to taxi cab medallions, okay? Because when Uber disrupted the taxi cab medallion industry, the value of the certificate became much less because the consumer just skipped and bypassed the medallion owner altogether and just went straight to the Uber app. Okay. By contrast, a growing law firm today, what is it that they need? They need new clients, they need an experienced workforce, and they need the digital content that senior attorney-led firms have. And when they take on those client lists and the experienced workforce that senior attorneys present and the potential for digital content, they grow that. And the value of a senior attorney's practice actually can grow when they join growing law firms. That being said, if senior attorneys simply stay on the sidelines and maintain their status quo, absolutely the comparison to the taxicab medallion owner whose certificate lost value, okay, that medallion value just plummeted in the 2010s and continues to unfortunately lose value because of the digital disruption that happened in the taxicab industry because of Uber. That will happen to senior attorney-led firms when they do not adopt digital. Because by not adopting multi-channel digital marketing, clearly you will generate less clients over time. That will have a dual impact on one, your short-term revenues will go down because you're just not billing as much or not collecting as much on the fact that you are attracting less clients to your firm. Even more importantly is the value of your practice will go down because you're just not replenishing your book of business as much as you did in yesteryear. So now in the early part of the 2020s, while senior attorneys have that synergy value, senior attorneys in the early part of the mid 2020s, they present four aspects of synergy value to growing law firms: instant client growth, a combined workforce, cumulative expertise, and treasure troves of digital marketing. Growing law firms want and need that synergy value. So as we make this comparison of the 2010s in terms of the digital disruption that Uber presented to the taxi cab medallion industry to where senior attorneys are today in the mid part of the 2020s, please, while you still have this great synergy value, we recommend to senior attorneys, if they're not going to adopt multi-channel digital marketing, consider bringing that synergy value to where that is wanted and needed, which is today's growing law firms. and that is episode 10 of the Ask the Law Firm Seller Show.